afternoon and welcome to Enhancing Cyber Resilience with Timely Threat Intelligence, a Health System CIO Media Inc. production produced in sponsorship with HHS 405D and sponsored by Fortinet. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of Health System CIO, and I will be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll take them later in the program. And we have a little poll we'll get to if we have time. Nice way to view the screen. Click on the top center, get it in side-by-side mode. Then you can adjust the divider to get the slides and the video boxes the size you want them, and it should say speaker view in the top right-hand corner. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today. First, we're going to go about 35 to 40 minutes with our panel featuring Chuck Christian, VP of Technology and CTO with Franciscan Health, Erik Decker, AVP and CISO with Intermountain Healthcare, and Troy Ament, Field CISO for Healthcare with Fortinet. So let's jump right in. Important topic and lots to cover. Chuck, let's start with you. Can you give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Sure, happy to. Franciscan Health is a 13 hospital system, Indiana up through Chicago, and we have a lot of physician practices. I shouldn't say a lot. We have a few physician practices in Michigan, so we're kind of do a tri-state thing. We have about 400 different locations spread across those 3 states, which include physician practicing, imaging centers, same-day surgery centers, and we are also part owners of Alberta Labs, which is a pretty good size reference lab in the Midwest. I have responsibility for the entire technology stack of the organization, from telecom, networking, servers, desktop, you name it. If it's broke, it's my fault.
Very good, Erik.
Hi, thank you. Erik Decker, CISO for Intermountain Healthcare. Intermountain is a health integrated delivery network located in the Mountain States, so primarily based in Utah, though we have a representation within 7 states across the region, mostly right now within Nevada and Idaho. 24 hospitals, it's a 24 hospital system. We also have a plan, so an insurance arm to the organization. About 42,000, we call ourselves caregivers, the employees. So we all identify as being part of the care continuum. And pretty dominant organization out there in the Western states. States. I'm actually based in Chicago myself. 200 and some clinics and 3,000 or so employed physicians and APNs and APPs.
And you're fairly new over there, right, Erik?
I am. I started 3 months ago, actually almost to the day. Actually, no, to the day. So prior to being at Intermountain, I was actually at the CISO for University of Chicago Medicine here in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Troy?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. So Troy Ament, I'm the Field CISO at Fortinet. I provide thought leadership and advisory to our customers after spending just over 20 years in technology, most of which on the provider side, ranging from leading Epic implementations, EMR implementations, digital transformation, and then being the CISO for 2 of the largest integrated health systems here in the United States.
All right. Well, I think you're qualified for the discussion. Very good. Okay, Erik, let's start with you. What role does threat intelligence play in your cybersecurity preparedness? And if you can give some examples of how specific threat intelligence might turn into practical actions.
Sure. So at Intermountain, we have a 24/7 in-sourced security operations center that manages all of the incidents, all detection capabilities, and so forth. As part of that SOC, we ingest a fair amount of intelligence, be it through commodity sources, through open source sources, to ISACs. So there's HISAC is obviously one that we heavily participate in. And then we also have our own private sharing communities as well, with some significant health systems in the United States. One of the things I will say is there's big conversation points around the value of some of this information sharing. So the question being, if an attacker is coming at an Intermountain or an attacker's coming at a Franciscan Health, are they going to use the same, the same platforms, the same IP addresses, the same, websites, the same phishing context, all of those things as they go across, the systems? I think that what we're seeing is that there's really two layers of intelligence. There's commodity intelligence that you're going to get through some of your Fortinets of the world or your FireEyes of the world or whomever. And I think that's good, just baseline intel that you should incorporate and automate into your systems for prevention and detection methodologies. It will only help you, to incorporate that. But the advanced threat actors, they know that exists, and so they're going to stand up their own infrastructures specific to each of their attacks that they come at you. So it's less about the IOC, the IP address, or the URL, or the URI syntaxes and things like that, from what we're seeing, and more about the tactics and techniques that they use. So that's going to be consistent. They might change IPs, they might change platforms, they might change, methodologies, but it's going to be the same way that they go about the attack, be it through a phish, be it through a remote access exploit, be it through a 0-day. We've seen tons of 0 days, just in 2021. I'm really surprised by how many of those have occurred. And so, what I like to do, and what I think is really important, is truly get a good sense of what those techniques and procedures are, the TTPs. Read into the intel briefings that come in from the FBI through CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, through your ISACs that you're participating in, and look at those vectors. If you can actually even leverage the MITRE attack framework as ways of understanding how the intruders are going to get into your environment, and build your defenses up against those vectors, and build your detection regimes up against those vectors, then you're going to get a lot of value in sort of this sharing. I will say as well, from an info sharing perspective, on a 1 to 5 scale, sort of in industry, we're probably early stages of maturity of what this looks like and how it can actually be effective. And part of that is just participation. When organizations are getting attacked by these intruders, the pushing out of that attack is fairly limited from the organizations, and rightly so, because it's an opt-in kind of thing. If you're undergoing a massive attack that's causing your system to shut down, the communication sort of clamps, as it were, inside your org, and what you release could have direct impact to adding anxiety, to the patients, on the situation of what's going on. If there's a mixed message that gets produced from the organization, could have litigation consequences, based on what's occurring, civil lawsuits, et cetera. Could have reputational brand damage. So I mean, these are things that organizations really have to consider as they're undergoing being part of an attack or being a victim of an attack. And so really having a solid plan in place to understand exactly what you're going to do and how that's all going to work is really important. We can get into sort of future state stuff later on.
Yeah, just quick follow-up. So you're saying it's helpful to the industry, to others, if those who are being attacked share as much as they can, as soon as they can, but you understand that sometimes that's not their first priority, and perhaps not even something they can do for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the less impactful attacks are probably shared more, and the big attacks, the ones that we see about in the news, a lot of people don't share that, except unless you're talking to the FBI, or the Secret Service or somebody like that. Then you'll share through those channels. A lot of people don't know this. You can actually share that information with CISA, again, the Cybersecurity and Information Security Infrastructure and Security Agency, and it's protected under the Cybersecurity Act of 2015. So you have liability protections, for doing that. And when you share that information with CISA, it does go back into the pipe, for everybody else. They work with the ISACs and such, so that information can flow through. But that's not a well-known thing. And so and again, your lawyers have to get involved, and you have to have that sort of pre-planned out on how you're going to participate in the ecosystem of sharing before you have any kind of big attack that's hitting you.
Chuck, what are your thoughts?
Well, actually, I think Erik, very well covered the landscape. And I'll echo the point is that up until recently, there really wasn't a lot of mechanisms for people to share data broadly. And I'll use the example of what happened last year with Exchange servers, where those, a lot of them are still unpatched, believe it or not. And people were getting just absolutely hammered. That information went out broadly. CISO was one of those that broadcast that. HHS and some of those categories, the public-private partnership that the FBI has with the security platforms and the security officers. But this is kind of like, and I'm going to use the word private club. People, if you don't understand the language of information in cybersecurity, you're not going to understand, the absolute depth of the threat. And so we have to depend upon people like Erik, our CISO. I've been doing security for a long time, but that's not my primary role at Franciscan. I let Jay take care of that load, and I really appreciate that because he worries about it more often. But my team and his team, we work in parallel because I've got all the hardware stuff, all the patching and that kind of stuff. And, and so I would agree that, the better information we can get out there in a manner in which it's informative, but we have to be very careful because it needs to be broadcast within those tight networks, because if it just gets out, people will actually exploit that information in order to attack others. Some of the things that really makes me scratch my head is when people give detailed information about how a 0-day works or something like that. And I'm going, well, you just painted somebody a picture that they can use in order to go attack someone. So I absolutely agree. Getting that information out to the people that's appropriate and can do forensics. And there are, CISA and some other ones will take that information and actually do pretty deep forensics on it. But as we've seen, there was a hospital in Hancock County that was attacked several years ago, and Steve Long's the CEO, and after it was over with, he did a really great job of educating other hospital CEOs about what the organization needs to do. So getting that information out is very helpful, not only from a security standpoint, but also from a business operations standpoint too.
Very good. Troy, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think Chuck and Erik covered it really well. I think some things I would reflect upon is it's really a team sport, kind of like Chuck talked about, between the technology team, the security team, and then also just data sharing, information sharing amongst the healthcare threat and security community, right? So that's important. When I look at this topic, I kind of consider it, both tactically and strategically. How are we using the threat intel, right? So tactically, I think some things that are really important is to ensure that however you're ingesting the data, if it's IOCs or actual, threat tactics, that you've got a really orchestrated and automated response mechanism. Because I think what we've seen is the threat landscape within our health systems has really expanded, but then the attacks have as well. The bad actors are getting more funded. There's becoming more of them. And in any time that threat data becomes more highly available, such as what Chuck talked about, when we're talking about 0 days, there becomes more bad actors utilizing that data. So it's, the attacks become more broad. I think a couple, use cases that I've seen, be really positive is also on the non-automated side. So having those ISAC relationships that Erik talked about, but then managed security partners as well, having a really good collaborative relationship with them.
All right, very good. Let's go to our next question. Chuck, we're going to start with you. I would imagine there are many sources of threat intelligence with varying degrees of cost and quality or accuracy. How do you choose?
Well, I mean, Erik ran the list. I think, in his earlier comments. And I think that, there's a lot of absolutely really good free information because, the security community has learned early on to share the information and share freely. But there are others that, are worth funding. It's just a matter of making sure you get a good information. And for me, like I said, I don't deal in those type of things as much as I used to, but I usually got, I talk to other folks like Erik and other professionals like him, trying to get a better understanding of what they use. And then depending upon if you're in healthcare, if you're in banking, or you're, just in industry, your sources of information are going to be a little bit different. The professional associations are also great. Chime has a security group, which is really, really good. I used to be fairly active in that, and I know Erik is as well. A great group. There was a void in the industry for that kind of participation, or that collaboration, and so they stepped up and did that. So I'll turn it over to Erik and let him
Sure.
list off some other ones and how they. Because I really never picked any that we paid for, because I thought there were ample opportunities out there to get it for free. And I'm a dumb old country boy from Alabama, so I'm going to go for free and good.
Yeah, so I'll give 3 options. First and foremost, look at the security vendors that you're already using today. They might have feeds available just through as Chuck was talking about, no cost. So that's a place to look, and that's going to get you to the commodity stuff. I would highly encourage anybody who is participating in this, if you're not in HISAC, to join HISAC. HISAC has never turned away a single hospital system because of an inability to pay. So, they will work out deals with you on what is a fair amount, based on what you're capable of paying and what you're not. There's only about, I think, 600 members that are part of HISAC today. And I think one of the numbers I've heard is we have upwards of like 7,000 or 8,000 some hospital systems in the United States. So like we need a lot more coverage in just the ISAC itself. And as Troy had mentioned before, you're going to get, not only through the ISACs, you're not only going to get the automated feeds that you can get out of that system, but you're going to get the place where you can have a dialogue with other security professionals, in a secure manner, in a secure chat, in secure email, secure, any number of those different ways. And so huge value there. The other thing I would suggest, again, another free service, and not a lot of people know about this, is CISA has a system called AIS, the Automated Indicator Sharing System. I think it's Indicator. Yeah. And that is, again, another feed source for free. You have to register for it. You got to have your CISO, essentially sign the paperwork to say that, you're the appropriate representative to consume the information. But you can consume directly from CISA some of the indicators that they're seeing, and so you should incorporate that into your environment as well.
You mentioned a couple of times, Erik, not a lot of people know in different instances. Can you talk more about why that happens?
So I think a couple of things. So CISA really, as an agency, is only about 2 or 3 years old. So it's still a fairly new agency. There's been variations of it, in prior configurations, but as an entity, as an agency itself, it's new. So that's one. Secondly, some of the like I said before, the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 allowed for there to be protections in place if you engage with them. This is a big challenge in the healthcare space, in general. It's like we deal with lots of different agencies. We deal with OCR, we deal with FDA, we'll deal with the FBI, with NIST, with Secret Service. Now CISA is sort of in the mix, and so you get these this alphabet soup of agencies that are out there, and it gets confusing, as to who you're supposed to work with and who you're not. And I would, even just posit in the current state, it's still not clear. I think we have a lot of room to improve on that. And I can reference the 4 or 5D stuff here in a bit, and we can get into how we can help normalize that conversation. But I think that's part of it. So, you know, but just as an example, other things that CISA does that people might not be aware of, with taxpayer, it's all taxpayer funded and free resources. They will conduct phishing simulations for organizations. They will conduct vulnerability assessments. They will do risk assessments. And they actually score out this information as well and aggregate it and produce it back to the industry to show for those who are participating what they're seeing, you know, from a industry benchmarking perspective. Highly useful information. You know, so hopefully with webinars like this, we'll be able to get that word out a little bit more and get people using it.
Very good, Troy. It does seem like a challenge of a lot of potential sources of information. And even if they're free, there's the limiting factor of time and amount of information that can be ingested and put to good use. So more thoughts from you around that?
Yeah, you know, I think we're going to go into this, I think, a little bit later, but always being cognitive of you know, where you're investing into your security program and not over investing into one area. But building upon what Erik and Chuck said, you know, HISAC is a great resource. At Fortinet, we're not a health system, but we're a member, right? And I think last month I did a threat briefing along with CISA to share threat intel that we were seeing with regard to insider threat. And, you know, us being a member, we're contributing to the community, and that's you know, free threat intelligence that all members of HISAC are getting. And then on top of that, I think, you know, going to your security partners first, right? Don't necessarily look to find a new product to solve for this problem, because I think if you've got a security platform that can accept, you know, threat intelligence, most of the time there's plugins within that threat platform to build upon, how sophisticated and how actionable your teams can be from a security operations perspective. And that's something that's always important. When I looked at my, previous security operations center, it's all being about really efficient, right? And managing those integrations, making sure that you're trying to remove the noise, so that all the security and threat hunters within your SOC can really be focusing on what matters is important.
All right, very good. I want to switch topics a little bit. Chuck, let's start with you. How do you engage with your C-suite as it relates to cyber preparedness? How do you communicate with your C-suite that cybersecurity has to be part of your enterprise risk management strategy? I understand that, you've always been a very security savvy CIO, right? So you've always been someone that's interested in security, and now you have the CISO, and you've never been a CISO, but you've always been sort of a security-minded CIO.
Well, I wore multiple hats.
Right. So maybe some thoughts around that interaction between the CIO and the CISO, how you think that relationship works best, and then other engagements among that whole group of C-suite executives that could create a positive security environment.
Sure. So I'll give you one tactic, but if you look at the top of my head, doing it once is the only time you can do it, like running around with your hair on fire. So it's the thing about it is in some organizations, the CISO reports to the CIO, and other organizations, depending upon its size, the CIO is the CISO. In two of my previous organizations, I was both. And in one of those organizations, I was also the CTO, depending, like I said, a health information exchange that has 70 employees, you're going to wear a lot of different hats. And the thing about it is, and I'm glad to see, organizations like Intermountain, where Erik was in Chicago previously, and Franciscan, they've invested in that professional, because cybersecurity is not something you can do as in addition to all the other things that you really need to do. However, in smaller organizations, the ones I really worry about are, physician practices are just as vulnerable as a 16 hospital system. The acute care hospitals, the community hospitals and stuff who just don't have the funding, or they don't believe that they have the funding to do that. And, my observation has always been is, managing your security is not about something that you're trying to really avoid, but it's going to happen. And to what degree does it need to happen? And so a lot of this work that I've done in the security side is managing the risk. What is the possibility and probability of things occurring? And, that if you don't patch your servers and stuff up and you don't change your admin passwords, then your probability is going to be pretty high about doing that. But security is not just the CISO's responsibility. You have to build it into all of your IT organizations. As far as I'm concerned, every member of our organization should be security focused. They should understand that this email that's coming from somebody who wants to give me something very well could be a threat vector that's going to shut my entire, system down because of malware and ransomware. And so, getting those folks to understand that. But the other thing, Anthony, about getting the CEO and the board engaged is you have to do your report outs. You have to have information to provide for them that is appropriate. And what is it that the board really wants to understand? Well, they want to make sure the organization is safe because they're also managing risk, not only from a fiduciary standpoint, from a legal standpoint, but also from a public relations standpoint, because patients choose where they go. And so they need to, they want to go to a place where they feel their information is safe. The last thing you want to do is be the headline of the newspaper. And so getting them engaged in sharing information, not to, a lot of people I've seen, or I shouldn't say a lot, some people I've seen use fear as a motivator for security. Well, I think safety is a better motivator rather than scaring somebody to death. You don't get people to buy car insurance by showing them car accidents. You get people to buy car insurance for having pretty little geckos up there to tell you about, say 15% for 15 minutes. I just did a commercial for them, sorry.
Well done.
But I think that, you have to build that relationship, and you have to be credible and you have to be believable. And you have to have a defensible position about the reason you want to spend money. I mean, we've, over the last 2 years, we've probably tripled the size of our security staffing program. And we've only done that because of building relationships, not only with the CIO, but with risk management, with compliance, with legal, and a lot of other folks to build those programs.
Very good. Erik, what do you need from the CIO, from the rest of the C-suite? What kind of support do you need to be successful as a CISO? You can't get anything done if people are undermining you. I mean, I think security is taken so much more seriously now than it was 5 years ago. So it probably is easier, but still you need that executive sponsorship and support to say, hey, we have to do what Erik says.
Right. And I would say even to go beyond that, it needs to be a shared responsibility. I consider myself to be the chief risk advisor around cyber issues to the business and a business leader, first and foremost. And that means I need engagement from the other executives and all the way down to the front line as well on the issues at hand. So I think obviously they're not going to understand all the nuances and how this all works. I mean, that's my job, is to make sure that I can translate the technical stuff and turn it into something that's palpable and understandable, to the rest of the organization. Adding on to something Chuck just said, I mean, when people ask me a lot as well, like, what do you do at the board and how do you, describe this information? What's the right level of conversation to have at the board? There's things that you need to think about. So, ultimately, be it at the board level or at the executive level, I would say there's three things that the organization wants out of you. First, they want to know that you're a trusted person that has the interests of the business at hand. I mean, going back again to the fact that we are business leaders, we are not our own special and unique part of the organization that just gets to do whatever we want to do. So we have to we need to make business decisions just like everybody else needs to make business decisions. So they want us to be a trusted partner. They want to know that they have the most capable people involved and that they've got the right level of depth and understanding in that. And they want to make sure that that progress is being made, to fix issues. That's it. Those are the three things that your board wants out of the CISO. And those are the three things that your executive teams want out of that. Now, how we go about doing that and proving trust and proving capability and proving that we are adding value back into the organization is the art of cybersecurity. So consider that as you're working with them. Some concrete examples I would always say are, make sure you have governance in place, and in that governance, make sure that you have an executive level team that has cross representation across your organization, and that those players are attending that session. I would suggest that you chair those governance committees with business leaders outside of IT and outside of cyber. We should, from a cyber perspective, we should be up there presenting materials, presenting risks, engaging in discussions, and curating a conversation and facilitating a dialogue, and having the organization ultimately get to what is our level of risk tolerance that we want to accept, within the confines of the situation at hand. So that's an art, to be able to establish that. I would also say, set a cadence for those meetings and never cancel them. Absolute worst thing you can do. Even if you don't have a topic, come up with a topic, because you want that face time, and you want to be there and engaging, and you want people to be considering, these issues in addition to everything else that they have to deal with. So if you start canceling that information, it just goes back into the wayside. It becomes, oh, that's Erik's problem, he'll deal with it. And then suddenly the cyber program again falls back into the shoulders of the CISO and the IT division, which it needs to be outside of there.
Excellent. Troy?
Yeah, I think, building upon what Chuck and Erik said, putting it in terms and in a process that your business leaders understand, right? So if you've got an enterprise risk management process and committee and board, and that's looking at fiduciary risk, that's looking at facility and patient safety risk, make it another subcommittee of that group, so that when you're looking at organizational risk, it is really embedded within all of that, just as cyber, right? Because it's all about risk, either to the brand, to the fiduciary responsibilities of the organization, or patient safety, right? I've kind of got a really great story. I had a baby a few years ago, and we had an enterprise risk management process and risk assessment process, and being real and being looking at the business impacts, and we had a solution that we were looking to bring in for infants, and that solution, while it provided a great solution for our patients, it didn't meet our security requirements. Fast forward within that story, my baby was almost in the ICU, and that tool would have been very helpful to take care of my son. But the organization had to take a look at risk and how that could impact the business, how it could impact the patient experience, and ensuring that we're within compliance. So it's really interesting, kind of full circle, when you look at some of these issues, but really understanding the business and aligning your processes to the business is important.
Perfect. Troy, we're going to start off with you on this one. What does current threat intelligence tell us to watch out for? And what are some of the best defenses against these threats? So what is currently going on?
Well, there's a lot, right? And I think it's a really challenging space for a lot of health systems. So, I think what a lot of, health systems are faced with is, I think the first thing I always talk about is just making sure that you're foundationally positioned well from a security perspective, making sure that you're following all the best practices, whether that's, from HHS or NIST or high trust, foundationally ensuring that you have, strong identity and access management, ensuring that you are taking care of workforce mobilization. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, right, is the expanding threat landscape within healthcare. But then some of the more advanced threats, when we look at ransomware attacks today, and then go back 1 year, what's really changed is not a lot of the attacks and what they're using, such as malware, ransomware. Yes, that's different and it's evolving and that type of thing. But the thing that we're seeing is the impact to operations, right? So in my role previously overseeing digital transformation, EMRs, and then as a CISO, never did I see a health system, with a downtime of their EMR go for weeks or months. So that's something that's, I think, something that a lot of organizations are really challenged with, today. So they're looking at that. And I think information sharing amongst executives, even at the CEO level, to really demonstrate this is what's happening during a major ransomware attack. That's some of the thought leadership and collaboration that we're looking to bring together.
Yeah, so we're seeing the effects be more devastating than ever.
Mm.
Erik?
So I'm going to put a plug in for a publication that the public-private partnership with HHS has produced in the last couple of years to help protect against these things. So we produced, so a little backstory. I'm the industry lead for an initiative called the HHS 405B program. Critical infrastructure has come together under a joint national program between industry and government. I have a government counterpart in the organization, and there are about 250 of us came together several years ago and produced the health industry cybersecurity practices, managing threats and protecting patients. We shortened this whole thing, this publication, up into an acronym called HICCUP, HACP. So HICCUP posits that there are 5 threats that the entire healthcare industry faces, ransomware being one of them, and 10 practices that you can implement to mitigate, much like hygiene, and upwards of 89 sub-practices stratified across small, medium, and large size organizations. So if you are a small physician practice of 3 or 4 physicians, there's a guide for you that's purpose-built to say, these are the things you can do, which will have complete and direct, well, I shouldn't say complete, it will have direct ability to mitigate the threats at hand. That publication, so first and foremost, everybody on this call should be looking at that, looking at HICCUP. And not only should you be looking at it because I think it's a great publication, but you should be looking at it because it has just been recognized as a recognized cybersecurity practice and amended high-tech. And so if you have adopted HICCUP in the last 12 months and you have a breach, OCR is required now, statutorily required, to take that into consideration when they're looking at civil monetary penalty, resolution agreement, and oversight functions. The whole point of that new law was really, let's try to find the balance between being a victim and being and not doing the right things, and ignoring the situation, ignoring the problem. So, take a look at there are some, again, to sort of get principled here, the attacks, the majority of attacks still come in through phishing. So having phishing defenses is going to be incredibly important. Looking at your exposed perimeter, things in your DMZ, as we're now all remote, you have to consider your endpoints as well as part of that perimeter, and your identity as part of that perimeter. So, turn off access to things like RDP. I am still shocked by how many attacks occur because people have RDP, remote desktop protocol, directly accessible to the internet. It is a highly used vector to break into an endpoint, and then they use that to pivot and get into the rest of your organization. So cut that off, and be on top of those critical vulnerabilities that are coming out. So when CISA and the FBI and everybody is out there warning people of the VMware issues, the Pulse security issues, the Microsoft Exchange issues that were happening, do not ignore those notices. They're notices because they're active attacks that are happening and leveraging them. And you want, with a critical vulnerability, you want to try to get that resolved within 48 hours if you can. I mean, it's that fast that you need to be able to operate.
Chuck?
I would agree, since I was one of the reviewers of the original 405B, and they've asked me to rejoin, so I'm kind of working with that group again. I absolutely agree, and I was actually very excited to see that publication because it's actually written in two different pieces, one for very large organizations and one for smaller organizations. And I think that's important because you need to address the risk, but appropriately depending upon the size of the organization. Larger organizations have more gaps. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So you have more opportunity for failure. And so I think that those are, some of the, great things that Erik mentioned about, and I think security is one of these things that we're never going to get perfect because, it's the threats are like, standing at the bank of a river and watching them run by. Independent of what's happening upstream is you're going to get more or less water. And so depending upon what's happening in the environment, you're going to get more or less threats. I've never seen less. And so we have to use this as much and many tools as we possibly can in order to cover the bases. And so it's something that you're going to have to be continuously vigilant on, continually learn. And if you're not engaged with the right organizations, with the right groups, the right professional organizations, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball, or you're going to have to spend a significant amount of money outsourcing your security practices, which that's kind of letting somebody else manage your bank account for you. So I think that's not necessarily good things. And so, kind of the best defense is going to be around a multi-layered approach. You can't, firewalls is not going to do it. Your SOC is not going to do it. Your vendors are not going to do it. You're going to have to create those partnerships in an internal organization in order to manage the various levels of threat. And part of that is your workforce, and so you have to educate them as well. So that's kind of all over the place, but that's kind of like how cybersecurity is. It's all over the place. I mean, I worry more about our IoT devices. We've recently put in a product so we'll know exactly what's connected to the network and what it's talking to. It was, when we did the proof of concept, it was absolutely shocking to see the amount of data that we could get by a piece of software and devices that would passively listen to the traffic on the network. And we're building that into our threat management as well.
All right, very good. We have some audience questions that I want to get to. So first one, we have recently engaged with CISO to facilitate a ransomware tabletop exercise. What are your thoughts on their free services, including their offer to do our SRA and provide recommendations? It is hard to believe that you can get such a great service for free when vendors are charging so much. Erik?
So the first thing I'll say is, for organizations that have a minuscule margin, let alone a minuscule IT or cyber budget, you're not going to beat what CISA is providing you. And CISA is prioritizing healthcare in the list of people that come in and ask to consume their services. They prioritize healthcare as on top of the list, for if they have to make a decision on company A or company B. So if you've got nothing today, I would absolutely do it. There's no reason not to. The information that they provide back to you, be it through the phishing simulations or the vulnerability assessments and so forth, cannot be used against you in a regulatory capacity. If that is, again, written in law. So it's not permitted. So I would do it. I would even say for the organizations that are out there that have these programs, you know, the phishing simulations, the vulnerability assessments, and so forth, I wouldn't, you know, an organization like Intermountain, we're very big, we're very complicated. The ecosystem is huge. There's no way that CIS's, you know, vulnerability assessment mechanism is going to be able to cover everything that we need to look at, you know, from an internal perspective. And it's going to give you that perspective from the outside world. But that said, it is an interesting benchmark, and it's an interesting another look at what, you know, to validate what our current programs are doing. So something to consider there.
Very good. Troy, let's go with you on this one. What are your thoughts on the growing threat of medical devices as an attack vector? And do you see any assistance on managing these from government agencies like CISO?
Yeah, well, great question. You know, I think that there's many agencies, right? Whether it's CISA, whether it's the FDA, you know, really putting a lot of thought into this. Also from my seat now at Fortinet, we're seeing a significant number of medical device manufacturers realizing that going to health systems and selling their products, or laboratory organizations having a strong security posture amongst their connected medical devices, a differentiator in the market, right? So they're investing into technology, embedding endpoint technology, installing firewalls, you know, right along with those, you know, connected medical devices. But you know, I think definitely that, you know, the partnerships with CISA, the FDA are important in creating guidance and creating regulation. I was just listening last week to Jessica Wilkerson with the FDA, and a lot of folks, you know, go back to the table and say that, well, the FDA does not regulate cybersecurity and connected medical devices. And yeah, I think her comments, you know, were really, would they regulate anything with regard to patient safety and connected medical devices, and
Right.
ensuring that device is secure from a cyber perspective really aligns with patient safety. So absolutely.
Can I add into that, Anthony?
Please.
I would just go out and say as well, to tack on to what Troy said, Jessica is a fantastic addition to the FDA and the cyber program, the cyber program for connected medical devices. You know, they have Suzanne Schwartz, who runs that whole division, has been a great ally in all of the last several years in understanding the problem. You know, the FDA has really stepped up with their pre-market and post-market guidance. And as they continue to mature their programs, you know, prior to Jessica being there, Seth Carmody was at the helm, sort of trying to work through those issues, and he did a fabulous job with the limited resources that at the FDA actually had to focus on this particular issue. So there's more that's happening on that front. Again, this is just an industry perspective, just sort of outside in, looking at what's going on over there. And you couldn't have a better advocate out there than Jessica. So if you as a practitioner are running into challenges with medical device issues, or, you know, I know they're specifically interested in any of the patient safety impacts due to outages or disruptions, you know, where the devices are somehow connected into the cloud, those kinds of things, you know, you can reach out to the FDA and have a conversation with them, and they would be more than willing to understand and talk to you about what the problem is.
Very good. I just want to read the URL that Erik has sent out for the Hiccup publication for those who listen to this from an audio point of view. That's phe.gov/405D. phe.gov/405D. Chuck, let's go to you for the next audience question. Do you have suggestions on some of the standard security metrics to use for reporting to the board? Do you recall when you were handling security, the things that were useful for the board to see?
Well, I mean, there's some. I think that what the board really wants to see is around risk. You know, what you're doing for the program. You know, what industry-wide things that are being reported, and what you're doing in order to mitigate those risks. And you know, there's a couple of Mitch and a few other CISOs like Erik that I know, they use what I call heat maps. They're basically a security risk matrix based upon, a lot of a variety of things, vulnerability and pen testing and that kind of stuff. Here are the threats we're identified. Here's what we're doing about it. And so I don't think the board wants, intimate details. What they want to do is they want to understand that you understand the risk. You can be trusted in order to identify that. You have appropriate staffing and resources in order to move the program forward, and you're keeping the organization safe. What I've done in the past is, and I'd recommend doing is not necessarily, Erik mentioned about sharing some of these things with the business leaders, and that's absolutely critical because you can be a talking head. It's your job to make sure that the organization's safe. But when you have one of your business partners like risk or compliance or privacy, also saying the same thing as part of that joint presentation to the board is very, very helpful and adds credibility to the program because it lets the board know that you're not working in a vacuum because you really can't if you're going to provide the level of safety and risk management that you need to for the board.
Erik, anything you want to add to that about reporting to the board?
Yeah, I'll say this is going to be one of those very board specific kinds of answers. Every board is a little different. Some of them want to stay incredibly high level. Some of them want to dive into details. And I found it very interesting as I talked to peers in the industry sort of on this exact question, like where they're at. But I can give you some advice. So first of all, I'll make another plug. One of the things that we are doing within 405D is we're producing a new publication, and that is Cybersecurity as a Component of Enterprise Risk Management. So we are in the draft of that phase now. We're actually leveraging because we do this all the time with 405D, we're leveraging one of the NIST frameworks. It's called 8286, and what that NIST framework talks about is essentially that, cyber as how cyber fits into ERM conversations, and then how you can, ultimately engage your stakeholders with it. So we're taking a healthcare specific bend on it, and there's going to be some guidance that's going to come out through that publication on how to have this conversation. To get specific, I would encourage organizations to adopt risk registers as a means of identifying and tracking the risks that are out there. And depending on how large your organization is, you might need a multi-tiered risk register system. It can get pretty complicated pretty fast to do that. But at the end of the day, the risk register should describe what the issue is, describe what the impacts could be, and then have some quantitative ratings associated to it. So the likelihood of this, the impact if achieved, and then the most important thing is that there's an actual owner to the risk, so that you can identify the problems, but if you're not working the problem and you don't have somebody identified to work the problem, you're just identifying a problem and you're not going anywhere with it. So with risk registries, you can do what Chuck just talked about, which is display up heat maps and show sort of where things reside on a one-page kind of view, and that's really helpful. Another view that's useful is looking at cyber maturity, and so I would encourage the adoption of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. If you adopt the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, you're also tying in nicely to the recognized cybersecurity practices and the amendment to high tech. And so by doing that, you could, based on their tiering structures there, you could talk about where you are in your journey. And you can have, again, sort of a one-pager conversation about where we are. Perfect state doesn't necessarily mean, the top end of maturity. It's going to be dependent on your institution and what level of risk tolerance and acceptance you're going to have to accept.
All right, I want to try.
One thing I'll add.
Go ahead, Chuck.
So, and I'm sorry, Anthony. I'm going to add one thing to Erik's comments. Is that some organizations, as he said, is the boards are different. Some may very well have a subcommittee of the board, which is part of compliance or part of risk that cybersecurity is going to be a part of. Particularly the folks that are trying to ensure the organization around cyber risk. And so the board may be very interested about how much their premiums are going to be going up which could be substantial these days, I understand. And the insurers are asking more and more questions. And so you may be invited into as part of those conversations, because the CISOs are going to be the ones who are going to partner with the organization, help manage that risk, which could very well impact those premiums on top of everything else.
All right, very good. Troy, I want to get one more question to you from our friend, regular attendee and industry legend, Bill Spooner. Chuck, I think you've met Bill once or twice, right? So,
yeah, a few times. Yeah,
once or twice.
absolutely.
All right, what role should an independent cybersecurity assessment play in the safe harbor provisions recently provided? One of your well-known industry colleagues recently opined that a self-assessment is no assessment. Troy?
Yeah, well, I think doing both is really important. I think when you're looking at organizational cybersecurity risk assessment, it's important for you to be partnering with your compliance and internal audit groups to be assessing risk that way. But then I think also partnering with an external firm to look at your security posture independently, and that that can be your big four auditor. It can be a cybersecurity organization. But then always taking that data and acting upon it, right? Making sure that's in your risk register, you're reporting that data to your board. And I think one thing that Erik said that I would emphasize is assigning accountability and ownership. Now it's really all a team sport, but it has to be very clear within an organization who has accountability to remediate threat or risk within the organization. And then as a CISO, I think knowing your board and then having a heat map like Chuck talked about that actualizes, and aggregates risk register items and puts it in business terms for the board to be able to understand clearly.
All right, 15-second lightning round, last word. Chuck.
I think we've, the thing about it is, I guess that security is not just security's responsibility; it's everyone's responsibility, and you have to instill that in the entire organization through education and just doing things to keep people on their toes, to make sure they're not doing something that is going to put their organization at risk, and they need to understand what that risk is, and make sure that you're partnering with the right group of folks in the organization. The folks in clinical engineering should be your friend. The folks in the rest of the IT department should be your friend. The folks at risk, in compliance, privacy, and whoever's working on insurance. It could be your COO or it could be compliance. So you need a lot of friends in order to get this done.
Need a lot of friends. Very good. Erik?
On the topics of threat intelligence, I would say join HISAC if you're in healthcare. That should be on the top of your list. I would also go out to CISA's website and see what the services are that you can consume from them. Sign up for the AIS system, the automated indicator sharing system, and bring that into your organization. You can do proactive blocking, out of that feed. And lastly, grab Hiccup and take a read and start looking at it.
Very good. Troy, last word.
Yeah, cybersecurity is a team sport inside and outside of an organization. And I think it's important for boards and cybersecurity leaders and CIOs to really understand and adopt that methodology.
All right, very good. That's about all we had time for today regarding continuing education. You could use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording of this event is ready for viewing. If you want to sponsor an event with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team, and you can go to our website to view upcoming webinars. With that, I want to thank our tremendous panel, Chuck Christian, Erik Decker, and Troy Ament. And I want to thank our partner, HHS 405D, for being with us today, and our sponsor, Fortinet, for making the event possible, and you, our attendees. With that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.